Hello, my name's Laura and welcome to this series of short videos looking at the anatomy of joints for yoga teachers. So I'm going to start with a brief overview and then you've got follow-up videos that will go into more detail. It'd be really helpful if you have the PDFs of this PowerPoint presentation as well so that you can see the images in more detail and some of the writing that's on there as well. So let's start with a brief overview. So what is a joint? A joint is a location in the body where two or more bones make contact. Most joints are mobile, allowing for the bones to move. There are three major types of joints. Fibrous joints between flat bones, such as the bones in your skull, and there is virtually no movement there. Then you have cartilaginous joints, which have a little bit of movement and are between cartilage and bone, such as your ribs and your sternum. Then what's most common and most interesting for us is the synovial joints. This is the most commonly seen type within the freely moving joints of the body, such as your shoulder or your hip. And you've even got smaller joints in the body, such as the sternoclavicular joint here, which is where my clavicle and my sternum connect. And even there, if you swing your arm, you'll find you can feel the movement in that joint. So these, as I said, are synovial joints, which means they're full of synovial fluid. And this synovial fluid allows for movement, allows for lubrication, and also slows down any joint deterioration or degeneration due to the wear and tear of moving. So very briefly, we're going to go into the structure of a synovial joint, but your next video goes into this in more detail. So within a synovial joint, we find the final layers of bone themselves, a layer of cartilage, a joint capsule, which also gets called a synovial membrane, and that secretes synovial fluid, a clear, sticky fluid. You can think of synovial fluid like an oil can for the joint that keeps everything freely moving. Then on top of that, there are ligaments attaching bone to bone. Then the muscles and the tendons. Now also in many joints, we get bursas. So bursas are fluid-filled sacs or cushioning, which help disperse the friction within the joint. We're going to go into that in more detail. Let's just wrap this up by looking at some of the joint types. This is going to be very surface level. You don't need to know this in detail. There's 6 different types of synovial joints. You have the hinge joint, which is the knee or the elbow. And a hinge joint allows for flexion and extension. Then you have a pivot joint, which allows for rotation, such as in the neck. You have the ball and socket joint, so like the hip and the shoulder. So if you think about that, if you think about my hip, I have the head of my thigh bone, my femur, it gets what's called the neck on top, and then that goes into the socket. Now the sockets aren't that tight, so you get movement in them. And the ball and socket joint is the most movable joints in our body. You also get something called a saddle joint in the thumb and gliding joint like the acromioclavicular joint. So that is a super brief overview on joints. We'll dial back in a moment to look at the joint capsule. But that's all for now. Thank you.